Are we predestined, or do we have free will? Is our every move in life scripted in advance, or do we exercise the ability to choose? Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Thursday, August 1st, 2025. This week and next, I'm talking about some of the paradoxes and polarities we encounter in the Christian faith. In my experience, there is no other polarity more misunderstood than the relationship between predestination and free will. Let me begin by saying that most everything you know or think you know about predestination is probably wrong. I don't mean that to insult you, but rather as a way to say that what most people mean when they use the word predestination is really what we call predeterminism. Predeterminism is the idea that whatever we do in life is, at least in some measure, determined ahead of time by someone or something else. And it doesn't have to be God who determines things. It can be our genetic makeup, our place in the world, where we were born, what kind of family we happen to be born into, what zodiac sign we were born under, if you believe that sort of thing, or any of several other forces that might or might not be at work. Philosophers debate this all the time. It's certainly not limited to discussions of theology, let alone predestination. But predestination is not predeterminism. Very little in this ancient Christian doctrine has to do with what we do day in and day out. Predestination is, as the word implies, it has to do with our ultimate destination, salvation or damnation, rather than anything we happen to do in life day to day. When someone says they were predestined, for example, to be in church on a particular day, or they were predestined to run into a friend on the street, they're using the term incorrectly. And that's where the predestination versus free will debate goes off the rails. We Presbyterians are closely identified with the doctrine of predestination, and with good reason. John Calvin made it an important part of his theology, which has carried on even through today. But Calvin himself did not invent the doctrine. No, it was first articulated some 1100 years before Calvin by the Catholic theologian we know as St. Augustine of Hippo, a town in North Africa. Over a period of years, Augustine's understanding of predestination grew and developed. But it was in an ongoing argument with another theologian named Pelagius, a British monk active in the years before and after the year 400 AD, that the doctrine really took shape. Pelagius believed that one had a role to play in one's salvation through good works, that God would reward the virtuous and punish the wicked for their actions in life. Augustine wisely understood that from a pastoral perspective, this would be devastating. If our salvation depends on our actions, then we enter into a world of fear and anxiety. We would be afraid each day that we had either done something or said something that would exclude us from heaven, or failed to do something with the same result. That fear would lead to a life of constant anxiety as we worried about our ultimate destiny. So, for Augustine, predestination wasn't just a biblical doctrine, it was a pastoral doctrine. If instead of worrying about whether our actions will disqualify us from heaven, we could learn only to rely on God's grace, our lives would be immeasurably better. But it's not just about relieving our anxiety. Augustine also knew that if we are constantly worried about our salvation, then we become profoundly and radically self-centered. Why? Because we become focused on ourselves and whether or not we are saved. By contrast, a life lived by grace is free to focus on other people, on other things. More than that, when we become aware of God's grace, we tend to become grateful for that grace. In this understanding of predestination, there is plenty of room for individual free will. We are free to do all kinds of things, and we are free to make mistakes, knowing that our mistakes do not condemn us to eternal damnation. The one thing we are not free to do is choose for ourselves whether to be saved. That's the one thing we are not free to do. In this respect, the tension between predestination and free will turns out to be a false dichotomy. Predestination and free will coexist easily and comfortably. But here's the thing. Even those who believe predestination works against our free will bump up against another hard truth. On our own, we are simply incapable of doing everything it would take to earn our salvation. In this instance, our free will is even more constrained. So I guess it comes down to this. Would we rather live a life of constant fear and anxiety, trapped in a self-absorbed life of worrying about our salvation? Or would we prefer instead to live a life of joyful gratitude to God, knowing that He alone has granted us the salvation we so desperately desire? For me, the choice is simple. I prefer a life free of the burden of fear and anxiety. Tomorrow, providence versus raw chance. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.